So for the writers here, I'm going to read from my new book that really is a book of elegies on Detroit, where I try to uplift the beauty and the ruin. I'll get to that in a minute, but for the writers here, I want to start off with another book. Thank you, Will. Is that good? Better? Yeah. So for the writers here, I want to start with a poem called Gilligan's Island, a literary primer. Yeah, it is funny. I was looking, I wanted to write on Gilligan, and I looked on the internet, and I was stunned at what is available to writers for Gilligan's Island. And so I looked it up on the internet and wrote this poem. So the poem really celebrates, above all, the internet. Gilligan's Island, a literary primer. It's after work, and you're watching that sitcom that debuted on September 26, 1964, while the Beatles conquered America, and your cousin, who would have been about 11, bought all the records she could get her little hands on. And while cramming a grilled cheese sandwich in your mouth, you catch sight of Gilligan, wearing that ridiculous white hat, and the skipper is slugging him again over some bungled attempt at escape. And Thurston Howell III is having a conniption because his investments aren't being attended to properly. And Mrs. Howell is weeping loudly, and Ginger is tussling her hair while Mary Ann stands back, eyeing Ginger with some vague envy. And the good professor is trying to get the hell away from them all as efficiently as he can. Then you have a profound epiphany, and you see the real meaning of this famous sitcom. It is a story of a man's condition. Man's condition is a moronic castaway on an island called Paradise, an isle where man's existential thrownness is about being trapped right here on a syndicated comedy show, week after week, never to escape. And inexplicably, you think of Christian existentialism, and the characters represent the 7 deadly sins, but with the millionaire's covetousness and the skipper's gluttony coupled with the Gilligan sloth, his overwhelming incompetence, and his sabotaging of each attempt at escape. And then you find the internet sites that attempt to analyze this show. Like fans of the Beatles analyze Sgt. Pepper and Abbey Road, the whole Paul is Dead thing, and you find, now riveted by the process, that Gilligan stands for Gilly, which is a Scottish fishing guide. What's this? A fishing guide? What's this symbolize? Will Gilligan be a guide for all men? Is this what you're here to understand? Suddenly you're scanning the web for clues, for literary explication. And then you think of Samuel Beckett waiting for Godot and the theater of the absurd and Pirandello, etc., and all these characters in search of, and that all these characters are thrown into a Sartre-like netherworld where they are condemned to remain fixed here on sitcom TV forever. And certain episodes do emerge. The attempts to build a raft, or the deep diving suit that Gilligan could have used to walk underwater back to Hawaii, to free them all again. Or the episode where the astronauts visited the island. Or what about the Harlem Globetrotters? And you see that this is Greek comic tragedy too, that the Furies will never be bought off or bargained with, and that Gilligan will continue to offend the gods mightily. And suddenly you see the parable, that this is a simulacrum for Eden, and that these are certain character types living here in the garden. And you learn that the SS Minnow was actually named after Newton Minnow, then the chairman of the daunted FCC, and that he had called television a vast wasteland, which brings you right back home to good old T.S. Eliot. And you think, my God, the possibilities in this are endless. Man, I think I forgot one of the poems I was going to read. Yeah, honey, can you look in the bag down there? There would be a paper floating around.
No, I found your flask. Well played.
Thanks. Who saw that? Thanks, Tim. Because this is Sweetest Day, I want to read a poem called Forgiveness. I was in a restaurant watching a couple fight, and this poem isn't really about what they were fighting about. It's just about the idea of fighting and how a couple fights and how they sweetly forgive themselves. And you think that forgiveness will be a profound event, and sometimes it's just an alignment of agreement again. And so this is called Forgiveness. After the fight, which was like a telephone call between the both of them that no one was answering rightly, they got into their Jeep and drove to the corner bar, ordered a few drinks, jumbo shrimp and sauce, French fries, ketchup. She told him she'd never ever forgive him for saying that her ass was getting as fat as her mother's. And that he could forget about sex. It was pretty much off the table like a spilled drink. Said that the arguing had to stop once and for all, and that it felt like stones hitting her on her face all the time, and she couldn't get out of the way of it anymore without really starting to hate him. She ate another shrimp, wiped her nose off with a napkin and also her eye, said, "I'm not crying." He said, "I know it, I'm not thinking it." He said he really didn't care about sex with her so long as she'd let him sleep in the bed beside her on account that it was winter time, and they still hadn't bought the big comforter she'd seen on sale last Sunday in the J.C. Penney catalog. She looked at him like he was a cold dog, trying to get back in the bedroom, even though the rule was he was to sleep most nights in the doghouse. She said only if he said he was sorry for calling her fat ass, and if he'd let the cat sleep on the bed like she'd been wanting since last fall when it got cold and the cat turned 14. He said, "Okay," and fed her the last jumbo shrimp, said it's only fair, I had 4, you only had 3. Then he apologized for calling her fat ass. Even wiped her chin off with his finger and thumb, gently like he was stroking the chin of the cat. She said, "Okay." The guy came over to the table, asked them if they wanted more drinks, food. She said no. He said yes, and she said, "Okay," and that.